Vienna, 1846. The Vienna General Hospital, the Allgemeines Krankenhaus, ran the biggest maternity service on earth. Thousands of women came through its doors every year, most of them poor, most of them with nowhere else to go. And a great many of them never left. They died of something called childbed fever, puerperal fever. A woman would deliver a healthy baby, and within a day, her body would turn on her. Raging temperature, pus, abscesses spreading through the abdomen and chest, and then a slow collapse into blood poisoning and death. Whole wards of new mothers dead within a week of giving birth. The hospital had 2 maternity clinics side by side in the same building, taking the same women off the same streets. Admission alternated by the day. If you arrived on the wrong day, you went to the first clinic, the next day, the second. Pure chance decided which door you walked through. And the 2 clinics did not kill at the same rate. In the first clinic, staffed by doctors and medical students, the death rate ran at roughly 3 times that of the second clinic, staffed by midwives. In the worst stretches, the first clinic was losing something in the range of 1 in 6 of the mothers admitted. The second, a fraction of that. The women knew. That is the part the records make unbearable. Semmelweis himself wrote of women found on their knees, wringing their hands, begging not to be admitted to the first clinic. Some, discovering they'd been assigned to it, chose instead to give birth in the street and then present themselves at the hospital afterward, because a street birth still counted, without her ever being touched by the doctor's ward. They gambled on the gutter over the physicians, and the ones who gambled on the gutter tended to live. Educated men from the finest medical school in the German-speaking world ran a ward the mothers themselves could see was a death sentence, and no one at the top could tell you why. The difference between living and dying was one thing. It was in that building the whole time, and it would take a man willing to count the corpses to find it. Ignaz Semmelweis was not a mystic, and not a crank. He was the opposite, a data man, in an age before anyone used the word. Appointed first assistant in the first clinic on the 1st of July, 1846, he did something almost no one around him was doing. He treated the deaths as a problem with a cause, and he started eliminating suspects. The reigning explanation of the day was miasma, bad air, some vague poison over the ward. Semmelweis found that useless because the bad air was the same in both clinics, and only one clinic was killing people. He tested each candidate, like an experiment. Overcrowding? He checked. The second clinic, the safe one, was the more crowded of the 2. Ruled out. Climate, weather, the season? Identical across 2 clinics in the same building. Ruled out. He noticed the mothers were even delivering in different positions, on their backs in the first, on their sides in the second, so he changed the first clinic to match. No effect. Ruled out. Then there was the priest. When a mother died in the first clinic, a priest would walk the length of the ward, past every bed, an attendant ringing a bell ahead of him, on his way to deliver last rites. Semmelweis wondered if the sight of the priest and the sound of that bell were terrifying the women, frightening them, quite literally, to death. But watch what he did with it. He did not sit and speculate. He had the priest change his route and silence the bell, and then he went back to the numbers to see if anything had changed. Nothing had changed. One by one, he knocked down every explanation the profession had, and every explanation of his own. He had ruled out almost everything. Almost. There was one door left, and behind it was an answer no doctor in Vienna wanted to open. On the 20th of March, 1847, the answer arrived, in the worst way it could have. A colleague of Semmelweis, Jakob Kolechka, a professor of forensic medicine, a friend, was supervising an autopsy when a student's scalpel slipped and nicked his finger. A small wound, the kind that happened constantly in a dissecting room. Within days, Kolechka was dead, and Semmelweis, grieving, did the thing that made him who he was. He read the autopsy of his own friend. He studied exactly what had killed him, the spread of infection, the abscesses, the pattern of collapse, and he recognized it. He had seen this exact pathology over and over on the tables of the maternity ward. What had killed Kolechka, through a cut on the finger, was the same thing killing the mothers. That was the door. Kolechka had been infected by something on the blade, something from the corpse, and the one difference between the first clinic and the second, the difference Semmelweis had been circling for a year, was suddenly, sickeningly, obvious. The doctors and the students of the first clinic began their mornings in the dead house, performing autopsies, often on the very women who had died of childbed fever the day before. Then they walked upstairs with the same unwashed hands and examined the living mothers waiting to deliver. The midwives of the second clinic did no autopsies. They never touched the dead. He called it cadaverous particles, decaying matter carried on the hands of the physicians, pressed directly into one laboring woman after another. There was no germ theory yet. No one had established that microscopic organisms cause disease. That understanding was still decades away. Semmelweis could not tell you what the particles were, but he could tell you where they came from, where they were going, and who was carrying them. And that is the part that could not be unheard. The men entrusted to bring these women safely through birth had been carrying death from the morgue and delivering it with their own hands. Not through malice, through ignorance and habit, and the simple fact that no one had ever told them to wash. Semmelweis had found it. Now he had to prove it. And proving it would mean asking every doctor in the building to accept that he had been killing his own patients. In the middle of May 1847, Semmelweis gave an order. Before any physician or student entered the maternity ward, before touching a single mother, he was to scrub his hands in a solution of chlorinated lime until the smell of the dissecting room was gone. He chose the chlorine for a plain reason. It was the one thing that killed the stench of the corpses on his skin. He reasoned that if it removed the smell, it might remove whatever the smell was attached to. Then he did what he always did. He counted. Look at the numbers, because they do all the work here. In April of 1847, the month before he acted, the death rate on the first clinic ran at over 18%, roughly one mother in 5. He introduced the hand washing in mid-May. By June, the rate had fallen to around 2%. July, just over 1. Within the following year, there were, for the first time in the clinic's memory, entire months in which not a single mother died of childbed fever. Not one. He had taken the deadliest maternity ward in Europe, and with a basin of chlorinated water, brought its death rate down to match the midwives, a collapse of roughly 90%. There was no room for interpretation. He had the ledgers, month after month, before and after, thousands of births. By accident, the alternating day admissions had handed him something the 19th century almost never had: a controlled experiment at enormous scale, with the dead carefully counted, on both sides. The math was unarguable. The mothers were living. The thing that had made a slaughterhouse of that ward had a name, a mechanism, and now a cure. And the cure cost almost nothing. A chlorine solution, a few seconds. Clean hands. Semmelweis believed the numbers would be enough, that any reasonable man, shown these figures, would do what he had done. He was about to learn how wrong that was, and that being provably right can be the most dangerous position a man can hold. Here is what the establishment could not forgive. It was never really about the science. Semmelweis's proof did not simply offer a better practice. It said, for years, you have been killing your own patients. Every mother who died on your ward, under your hands, you carried the thing that killed her. The cleaner his numbers got, the sharper that accusation cut, because every life he now saved was a life that could have been saved all along. These were gentlemen. A physician was a man of standing, and the sentiment of the age was almost exactly that. A gentleman's hands are clean, by definition. To wash them on the say-so of a junior Hungarian assistant was to concede the unthinkable. So the profession closed ranks. His own superior, Professor Johann Klein, who ran the first clinic, never accepted the theory and made Semmelweis's position increasingly impossible. Elsewhere in Europe, prominent obstetricians didn't merely disagree. Some of them, in the years that followed, are documented publishing mortality figures shaded to make the chlorine washing look useless. Men manipulating the data to protect a conclusion they had decided in advance. And Semmelweis had one further weakness. He hated to write. For years he barely published, letting friends announce his findings for him, so his enormous claim reached the profession second-hand, thin, easy to dismiss. He had the greatest result in the ward and the weakest paper trail, and his enemies had the journals. He was right, and it was making him powerless. The more the profession refused him, the more it had to keep refusing him, because to admit Semmelweis was right now was to admit how many mothers they had buried while being wrong. In 1849, Klein refused to renew Semmelweis's appointment. The official reason offered was that he had sympathized with the Hungarian Revolution then convulsing the empire. The effect was clean. The man who had solved childbed fever was quietly pushed out of the great hospital where he had solved it. He left Vienna and returned to Pest. And in Pest, the story repeats itself with a terrible consistency. He took charge of the maternity division at the St. Rochus Hospital, a ward with its own childbed fever problem, and he did the same thing again. Imposed the washing, drove the death rate down toward 1%, and then below it. It was not a fluke of one clinic in one city. He reproduced it. It worked wherever he was allowed to enforce it. In 1861, after years of pressure from friends, he finally wrote the book, The Etiology, Concept and Prophylaxis of Childbed Fever. He laid it all out, the theory, the mechanism, the ledgers. He sent copies to the leading obstetricians of Europe, and it changed almost nothing. The lectures went on denouncing him, the wards went on refusing him, the mothers went on dying, in numbers he alone seemed able to see. And Semmelweis broke. In his final years, he began writing open letters to the great obstetricians of the continent, and the letters grew wilder and more furious until he was naming them directly as murderers, men with the blood of women on their hands who refused to wash it off. His behavior became erratic. His own wife came to believe he was losing his mind. What was actually happening to him, no one can say for certain, even now. Some historians point to advanced syphilis, an occupational infection among doctors of the period, some to an early dementia, some to sheer exhaustion, the collapse of a man who had spent 18 years watching preventable deaths pile up while the profession looked away. The honest answer is that we do not know, and anyone who tells you they know for certain is selling you a cleaner story than the evidence supports. But by the summer of 1865, whatever its cause, his condition had become an embarrassment to his colleagues. And his colleagues decided to do something about it. Late July 1865, a referral was drawn up by several of his associates and fellow physicians, committing Semmelweis to an asylum. He was told he was going to visit a new medical institute. Instead, on a pretext, he was delivered to a public insane asylum in Vienna. He understood what was happening almost at once, and he tried to leave. He did not leave. Several guards seized him. When he resisted, they beat him badly. He was forced into a straitjacket and shut in a darkened cell. The recorded treatments of the place ran to cold water dousing and doses of castor oil. This was not care. It was confinement, and it was violent. He lasted 14 days. On the 13th of August, 1865, Ignaz Semmelweis died in that asylum. He was 47 years old, and the cause of death is the detail that turns this from a tragedy into something closer to a curse. He died of sepsis, blood poisoning, spreading from an infected wound on his right hand. The same class of infection that had killed his friend Kolechka through a nicked finger, and that had killed those thousands of mothers on the first clinic ward. The man who built his life's work on the danger of infection carried through broken skin died of exactly that. And the record does not let us say with certainty how the fatal wound got there. It was very likely the beating, the timing, and the injuries point that way, and most accounts treat it as the cause. But the asylum's own paperwork is murky, and one note strangely claims the gangrene on his hand appeared of itself. So I won't tell you the guards killed him, as though it were settled fact. What is settled is this: he entered that place alive and walking, and 2 weeks later he was dead of the disease he had given his life to. His body was carried to the dead house and dissected in the same kind of room, doing the same work, where he had once bent over corpses, searching for the thing that killed the mothers. Almost no one came to the funeral. He was buried in Vienna, rejected by his profession, and as far as the medical establishment was concerned, wrong. He was not wrong. He had never been wrong. And within a few short years, the whole world would be forced to admit it. Look at what happened next, because the timing is the cruelest part of all. Within roughly a decade of Semmelweis's death, the ground he had been standing on his whole life finally solidified beneath him. Louis Pasteur assembled the germ theory of disease, the proof that microscopic living organisms cause infection, and in Britain, Joseph Lister, building directly on Pasteur, brought antiseptic method into surgery and cut his own death rates dramatically. The invisible, cadaverous particles now had a name: bacteria. Everything Semmelweis had observed, everything his ledgers had proven and could not explain, now had an explanation the profession could accept. He had been right the entire time. He had simply been right before the profession had a theory that let it say so without losing face. The honors came once they were free. A statue was raised to him in 1894, nearly 30 years after that asylum cell. The great university in Budapest was renamed Semmelweis University. He became the savior of mothers. In 2020, as a new pandemic sent the whole world scrubbing its hands, his name was in front of hundreds of millions of people again. Every surgeon who scrubs in today, every nurse at every sink, is following the order that got him destroyed. But the sharpest thing his story left behind is not the statue. It is a phrase that historians and psychologists now use in his name: the Semmelweis reflex. It describes the reflex-like rejection of new evidence because it contradicts what an establishment already believes, the automatic refusal to look, precisely because looking would cost too much. They named the pattern after him because he is the purest example of it we have. And that is the thing to carry out of this. It was not ignorance that killed those mothers in the years after 1847. Semmelweis had ended the ignorance. He had the cure, the proof, and the ledgers to back it more than a decade before Pasteur. What killed them was the institution's need not to have been wrong. The knowledge existed, it worked, it was simple and nearly free. And it was buried anyway, not in some ancient forgotten text, but in the open, in the leading hospitals of Europe, by the very men whose job was to save the people it would have saved. So the next time you're told that the medical establishment always follows the evidence, that a discovery this clear could never be ignored, remember the ward in Vienna, and the women on their knees, and the count of empty months when nobody died. And ask yourself, how many other Semmelweises the record is still keeping quiet?